Wade. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Now, who are these children dressed in blue? God's gonna trouble the water. Well, they must be the ones gonna see us through. God's gonna trouble the water. Wait, wait in the water. Wait in the water, children. Wait in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Again, God's gonna trouble the water. Last time. God's gonna trouble the water. Amen. Thank you for those rhythms, Karen. Thank you so much. At this time, I want to invite Maya Rector and Leslie Hamilton into the space to lead us in our opening sentences, which will be found on your screen. We invite you to join in with them from wherever you are.
In the beginning, there was God.
There was Goddess, there was Great Spirit, there was Allah, the universe, the all, the us.
And then there was longing, a longing to experience what will be, a longing of knowing what was already known.
World is being born, the world is being born, the world is being born.
And from that longing came the first songs of creation, and the portal between thought and possibility opened, and the loud symphonic chorus of being arose.
And God said, "This is good."
As solar systems sang their hymns on countless worlds, the water stirred. A planet, azure like the first waters, dark like the first waters, gender full like the first waters.
God danced, her body reverent, his body reflective, their body the holiness of reverence.
The waters in their womb stirring, they gave birth.
World is being born, the world is being born, the world is being born.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Maya and Leslie. At this time, I'll invite Kip, our associate pastor, to bring us a mouthful of announcements. Kip, you're on mute.
Yep. The screen was moving on me. The announcements are now up on the up here on the screen. So I'm going to skip the first because we'll get that in a moment. And thank you, great thanks to Ian Engelbretson, who is running tech for us today, which is always a challenging job, and Ian brings such skill to it. We are now in the second Sunday of our Outreach Month, exploring this theme of Rooted by the Water. This is when we raise the bulk of the monies that go to support our justice partners and initiatives. And we are channeling our rage for racial justice, accessibility justice, gender justice, and environmental justice. We welcome you. We'll remind you of this again at the offering, but we do welcome you to make additional gifts on behalf of any of these particular initiatives, or you can make gifts to the overall initiative. Our Bible study is back on in a series called Freedom is a Constant Struggle. The book of Exodus meets on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month, so the 14th and the 28th this month. Our Rainbow Connection group is meeting this Thursday. The date is wrong there. It's Thursday the 15th at 8 p.m. online, and there will be a socially distanced BYO picnic on Saturday the 17th at noon in the churchyard. Our sci-fi book club is gearing up to meet again on November 10th. You should have plenty of warning now for reading the book. It's How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe by Charles Yu. Our pandemic parenting group is meeting every Monday at 8:15. We welcome you to join that if you are working through and improvising in the art of parenting during a pandemic. Power is organizing phone banking every Tuesday and Thursday evening until the election from 6 p.m. to 8:30. So you can sign up via Zoom through Power's calendar at the link there. Voter engagements, we've got a goal there of having 40 people from our church each contact 30 people in their circles ahead of the election to ask if they're registered and have a plan to vote. So far, we've had 8 folks make a total of 310 contacts. 5 others are making contacts, but we don't know their numbers yet. 17 more people, we need 17 more people to reach the goal that we have set for folks reaching out to potential voters. You can contact Jamie Stroud at her email address there and let her know how you plan to reach out to folks, the number of folks you've contacted, and how many you're planning to contact, and if you've got any commitments from folks who are saying yes, they will vote. Care Messner, this is worth noticing. Care has continuing workshops going on through the Naramata Center. We have a code that you can use so that anyone in our congregation is able to sign up for these workshops, for CARE's workshops or any of their online workshops at no cost to you. Resilience 2020 is the code you should use at registration. CARE is doing a number of mini retreats all on Saturdays called Crafting Your Heart Story. On November 21st, a workshop called Honoring Diversity as a Spiritual Practice. You can find more information out at the Naramata Center website. Philly is still looking for poll workers, and they are paying folks to do that. You can go to Power the Polls website and sign yourself up to get trained and be assigned. We do have a prayer request email if you want to make sure that pastors are getting prayer requests that you have. You can send an email to prayers@chestnuthillunited.org. I think that is all the announcements. If there's anyone who has an announcement that needs to be made that wasn't in here, you can raise your digital hand. And I'll give just a moment to see if anyone needs to raise their digital hand so that we can unmute you. If there are no further announcements, then I will turn this over to Joy Berge, who is going to introduce our speaker for the day.
Good morning, all. On this, our 4th annual Environmental Justice Sunday, it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome 2 special guests today, Dr. Ife Kilimanjaro and Karen Smith. Dr. Kilimanjaro's CV is quite impressive. She has facilitated gatherings and alignment processes held by U.S. Climate Action Network, 350.org, the Extreme Energy Extraction Collaborative, NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Program's Black Labor Convening, and others. I developed a deep appreciation for Dr. Kilimanjaro when she was on staff at U.S. Climate Action Network. I saw her gifts immediately when I watched her lead workshops at a conference I attended representing our Environmental Justice Center. It was at that same conference, by the way, that I met Colette Pichon Battle, who preached our inaugural Environmental Justice Sunday sermon 3 years ago. That was a conference well worth going to, let me tell you. Among many other activities, Dr. Kilimanjaro has co-founded The Wind and the Warrior, a collective of spiritualists and activists dedicated to integrating social activism with spiritual practice, right up our alley. Thank you, Dr. Ife. And of course, we welcome back Karen Smith, known to many of us in this congregation. She's a former member of our church, is known around town as Magic Fingers, and is the lead percussionist and artistic director for We's the People's Collective and Sisters Laying Down Hands. Karen is also a playwright, director, poet, and producer, and wonderful person. I welcome and thank both Dr. Kilimanjaro and Karen Smith for sharing their extraordinary gifts with us today.
Thank you so much, Joy, for introducing our guests. We'll hear from both of them as we continue to move through our worship. Right now, I think I do see a couple kids in the room. I think I see Nevaeh and Adrian and Elena and Josiah. I see you all. I'm not sure if there are any other kids here, but I do want to take a little bit of a minute to talk with our kids. So I see you all, and I actually wonder if, Ian, if you could help us take the Tice family. Let's see if you all can come off mute, because we're going to want to talk together for a minute. Oh, and I see actually there. All right, there are the Ernos. I see Aaron, Cooper, and Jackson. Oh, and I love knowing that even though you're really kind of far away from where I am right now, you're right here on the screen. That makes me really happy. Hi, you guys. And Oren and Cooper and Jackson and Nevaeh and Adrian and Josiah and Elena and any other kids that I don't see at the moment, I want you to meet our new friend, Dr. Ife. She's going to kind of talk with us in a second. She's our special guest this morning, and she's going to be talking about some really powerful and amazing experiences she's had and what it means for her to kind of be a person that lives on this earth. So I'm going to invite her, just like I'm going to invite you in a minute, to think a little bit about what you love about water and how you protect the water. But before you do, I want to remind us all of something. Anytime a baby or a kid is baptized at our church, we ask the family a bunch of questions. But one of the questions that we ask every family, every grown-up that's part of a kid's life that's there as part of their baptism, we ask them this question. We say, as we celebrate the gift of water for baptism today, do you commit to care for and protect the sacred waters of this earth so that all children now and those to come can share clean, clear waters? We ask every grown-up that's part of a baby or child's life when they get baptized if they're not only going to commit to help raise that child in a way that helps that child become all that they need and want and are called to be, but we also ask them to commit themselves to help protect the water. So we're saying, will you take care of this child? And while you're at it, will you please take care of these waters? Because we baptize with water. So this morning, I want to ask all of our kids, and I want to ask our friend Dr. Ife, two things, and you can answer either of them, or you can answer a question I didn't even ask you. I want to ask what you love about water. Is there something special you like about water, or something you like to do in water? And the other question is there anything that you do to protect the water, to make sure that our water is clean and clear and that other people have water? So I'm going to ask our kids again to kind of come off mute and ask Dr. Ife to come off mute. And maybe if we have a couple kids respond, then Dr. Ife can also say what she loves about water and maybe one thing she does to help protect our water. So, any thoughts?
No. I said I don't know.
Hi, guys.
Go ahead. I like to swim in the water, and you can protect the water by picking up trash in it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Absolutely. What else? I think that household of yours might be near some water now. Is that right?
I like boogie boarding in the water, and I don't throw trash in the water.
Oh, that's great. That is great. It's
So
fun to think about
important.
boogie boarding. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Other ideas, other things that you all love about the water or like to do in the water. Yeah. Dr. Ife, what about you? What do you like to do in the water? What do you love about it? Something that you do to take care of it.
Well, I love, oh, I see, is that someone in the Tice family had their hand up?
Oh, good. Go ahead.
Um,
Oh, great.
we don't eat the little
No.
crabs or lobsters.
Mm.
Okay, yeah.
No, I was saying, how do you eat? What's your
Vegetarian.
diet? Right, and that's helpful in what way?
Okay.
I don't know.
When pollution.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Got it. So by being vegetarian, you're actually helping certain creatures to keep on living and do their creature thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Including ones in the water. Wow.
I love that. And I love the thoughtfulness around cleaning up trash or not leaving trash. Um, that's just so beautiful. And it shows that you're thinking about water as in a way, as another being, as well as something that you want to keep, when you want to care for, so that you can keep being around it and in it. So I think that's really beautiful. And I want to thank you for sharing that. I also think about those things and don't leave things, try to remember, or not try to, I do by now, have a regular practice of using the garbage cans if I have something, or trying not to take things that need to be thrown away. So using containers that I can reuse, and not using water not leaving water to run in the faucets. So like in doing my part to kind of to conserve or to not waste water, because it's such a precious resource that we have. And then something that I do that I'll share a little bit later is I also talk with and pray with water, which is an important part of my tradition. We see water, as you all in some ways do, by the way that you've talked about it, as like another living being. It has life, it carries life, it gives life. We drink it, we need it to live, and so there's that kind of life relationship that we have. So those are some things that I do, and I would love to hear if there's anything else that came up. I see some giggling and movement, and then also some deep reflection. Is there anything else that comes up for you all?
Get baptized.
You like to get baptized.
You get bad guys?
Water.
That's right. The forces of good have got to be activated. And so all that is good within you, bring it forward. Yes, indeed. You're muted, Reverend Noonan.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Ife, and thanks, kids, for helping us think about water and how it's something that we live with and care for, and how it's really a gift to all of us. It's not something that we can just go buy, even if we can buy bottles of water in the store. The water that is on the earth is not something we can buy. It is a gift to all of us, given by the creator. So thank you so much for helping us think about all that. And I suspect that there's going to be some more really important stuff to come. Thanks, Dr. Ife. Thanks, guys. All right, at this time I want to bring our Bible reading for the morning. It comes longer context, but it's kind of coming because someone living long ago noticed that in that particular place and at that particular time, religion had kind of become just something people did as a formality. They went through the motions on certain things. They sacrificed their animals and did their prayers, but it didn't really ever affect their hearts much. And it didn't really change how they were living in the world. So this particular prophet, Amos, was getting pretty fed up. And so this is what Amos had to say back then, and some of this is still very relevant for us now. It comes from Amos chapter 5. I despise your festivals. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. This is God speaking. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. This is God's good news. Amen. At this time, our first reading this morning will be brought to us by one of our own poets, Nyla Francis.
Song of Autumn. On the trail that moves with water, on the hem of 10,000 leaves, saffron tongue of poplar, scarlet gaze of oak, the beach is an open book, spilling tales from its silver gray spine. Emptiness is a seed pod, the silence of shedding bark. Under this true blue sky, deep in this bronze flame heart, I take all that is given, sweet melancholy, bleached bone ache, determined to sing through the dark.
God looks into the hearts of those who seek answers to ancient questions, and then puts us on the path and in the company of those who also seek. On the path, you encounter sometimes clear skies, sometimes a stumbling stone or two. Whatever will inspire you to ask more questions. The job of answering questions has been granted to the celestial and guardian Abossum. After much walking, you look to your left and look to your right, and you know that you are not alone. You begin to see and to hear and seek to speak the wonders of God, those that are chosen by God to serve. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Joy and Reverend Noonan, for this beautiful invitation, for Nyla for that beautiful poem, for the conversation with our young leaders. And for the wonderful Karen Smith, whose communication with the drums is just so beautiful and powerful. And for me, instructive on how to, listen and connect with spirit. So in the conversation with the young people, with our young leaders, I just totally revamped in my mind or reordered what I want to share, because it just so inspired by the young lady who said that we've got to, fight evil. We've got to fight the bad people. And it gets at the core of what I would love to have you all think about, remind myself to think about, and that is leaning into our greatest good, our talents, our capacities to bring light and goodness and affect change based on that light and goodness in this world, to bring about ultimately the kind of world and set of relationships and policies and practices that promote life, that foster and embody life, that allow us to thrive in healthy relationships with one another and with the world, our relatives who assume other forms, the trees and animals and plants and the rivers and streams and oceans and so forth. So, when I was initially preparing, I was like, well, why? I was curious about the invitation, and initially was thinking, as Joy mentioned, I've been working with the U.S. Climate Action Network for some time. I left there a few weeks ago, but then, there's a part of us, a part of me, I can only speak for myself, that has this ego thing going on where it's like, oh, it's because of this thing that I made in my mind. But often, there's something deeper, something more sacred at play, something more deeply spiritual. And in the course of really thinking through what it means to lean into our greatest good, to affect the kind of change we want in this world, I've really been in that space for these last few weeks, and it's really inspired some beautiful meditations. So, what's been really sitting on my spirit is this message that we all have the capacity to do something to address this climate crisis that we're in. And if there's any part of you, me, us, that wants our children's great-grandchildren to live in a world that is governed, by people, practices, and policies that value life, then I wonder, what kind of ancestor do we want to be? And in thinking about what that means and what that looks like, what are the things that we do now, that we can do now, that's within our ashe, that's within our personal power, that's within our divine destiny that leads us to that. So, we have to consider what we're doing now, how we're living, the choices we make, the decisions that we make, what we and who we fight for and advocate for and fight on behalf of. It's these questions to ask ourselves that, and our process of answering them, that leads us, or that can lead us to this place where we're able to see how we can bring forward that light, that allows us to, at the end of our days, look back and say, oh, I've done good. And I've lived in a way that my ancestors, or my descendants, can be proud of, and that my ancestors, of course, can be proud of as well. I'm going to take a minute to go into a little bit of heavy stuff, because I think that it's important to situate what we're understanding as this existential climate crisis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but situate it within historical processes, because what we're experiencing now with the increasing and more intense wildfires, hurricanes, flooding, these natural disasters, what we're also seeing in terms of sea level rise, the ice caps melting, the fluctuations toward warmer weather, warmer global temperatures, again, with some fluctuation, but the impact that all of this has on life as we know it now, we're beginning to see and experience what that is from the families, from the communities whose lives are disrupted as a result of these disasters, the sea level rise, this flooding, these hurricanes, these fires, and so forth. But all of this didn't just come to be. It didn't just happen because of practices within just the past few decades, but rather we're inheriting something and we're having to fight a battle that was left to us by ancestors who were not as thoughtful about, or perhaps didn't, for whatever reason, think about the implications that not just their practices would have on future generations, on their descendants, but also the impact that the ideas that and the beliefs and the values that these practices represent, that they would continue to perpetuate practices over time that would continue to put us in a position where we're now having to face this major, we're having to address the impacts of this major existential crisis now within our generation. So, all of that. And there's still hope and promise, but let me just kind of walk through a little bit of history. So we know that we're inheriting a world left by the descendants of people who've benefited from invasions around the world, who've benefited from enslavement of human beings, of people, of children, of women, of men. People who are descendants of colonizers, people who have benefited from manifest destiny ideology, people who have benefited from profit-driven industrial capitalism and the development of industry and manufacturing, which is inherently destructive of the earth as it's through mining processes and extraction methodologies, and also destruction of the people whose lives for generations have been organized in those places, and they're having been pushed off of those ancestral lands and often forgotten, put in positions where we've forgotten how we lived in the world in balance and in right relationship with the earth. People whose interests and ideologies of their race, of their class, of their gender have been preserved in the Constitution and the laws that were born from it, the branches of government that were born from it, the policies and the practices that were born out of it. Some, a relatively small class, benefited from all of this thrust of industrial development and of extraction and destruction, but a lot of folks around the world did not benefit. Arguably, it's said that, well, we wouldn't be able to have cars and we wouldn't be able to have the kind of life that we see now. And while that's true, life could have been very different without those things. But what's been taken from us as a human race is that we don't know what we could have been, what we could have become, had we not continued to live in right relationship with the earth, with the lands, with the waters, and so forth. So today we're experiencing the impacts of unfettered industrial expansion, over 250 years of it. Expansion led by Europeans and their descendants whose cultures evolved to embrace and embody ideas that the world embodied ideas that organize the world according to hierarchies that are based on superiority and inferiority, that some races and cultures and genders are superior to others than and others are inferior, lifestyles, and even species. So in this process, these historical processes, humans are led to believe that we're above and better than everything else in this world, on this earth. And it's out of these hierarchies of superiority, inferiority, that entire populations have been subjugated, and justification for exploitation of the earth and her resources has been has taken place. It's been justified. These cultural ideas that have been passed down from one generation to the next have reinforced and supported this notion that theft of land and resources is okay. That the approving, it's been approved, it's okay historically that people have been kidnapped and enslaved. That's like these historical blips that made African people perhaps in a better situation than had we been left on our own. And that simply cannot be verified, and it's unjustified, and it's wrong. These cultural ideas that get practiced and embodied and embedded in our systems of education and other places, that the colonization and the subjugation of entire populations was perfectly justified in the pursuit of modernity. And so, I'm taking a minute to kind of walk through these pieces of history, and clearly so much more can be said, because I want to emphasize that what we're experiencing now with regard to the climate crisis, to this need for us to radically reduce emissions, that the conditions leading up to the moment that we're in are not recent, but have unfolded over hundreds of years. So that's one point. The other, that that in our responses to address the climate crisis, we must not only deal with the impacts of climate change, we must not only fight to reduce emissions and implement renewables. So these things that kind of buy us a little more time as we search for and implement more radical solutions. But they also require for solutions to be lasting, for them to be impactful, it requires something of a kind of radical change within ourselves and what we demand in the systems, this economic and social and political system that we live in, which is nothing short of a radical and fundamental change of society. And we have got to, there are elements of our culture and the ways that we show up in this world that have also got to evolve. There are many ways that we can approach that. I know that was just an incredible generality, but I'd like to give an example if you'll bear with me. So something as simple as how we celebrate holidays. Often, if we look at the practices that have been passed down to us, that have been given to us by our ancestors with joy, with love, with care, often they are incredibly wasteful. I mean, there are elements of it that are incredibly wasteful, and we've got to really look at that. The economies that are based on the economy that's based on consumption and buying lots of cards and lots of things that are disposable, these contribute to the contamination of the world, and then in their production, they contribute to the emissions, release of tremendous emissions that we could do without if we really think differently about some of our cultural practices. So the reason why I bring that up, it's not to indict how we love and share and celebrate with one another, but rather to include in this range of solutions that are necessary to implement simultaneously, that we've got to not just call for the ending of fossil fuel extraction and the radical reduction of emissions, but that in doing so necessarily requires that we shift how we show up in the world and what we think that we need to live. Do we need to change our wardrobe every year? And I'm not assuming you all, from what I understand, are pretty progressive, so this may not even be an issue for you all on this phone, but it is for so many folks. You know, when we think about how we do our basic care and maintenance, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, you know, putting things in our home to make it beautiful, all of these things come to us out of industrial processes that are polluting, often, overwhelmingly, are polluting and are created with the intention of having short lifespans so that we can consume them and then have the need to go get more because of the lifestyle that we've created for ourselves. So there's a lot to do in this work. I know part of this, the ask was to explore the intersections with race and in particular climate change and race. And I think that the foundations we've seen in these historical processes by, you know, for this this manifest destiny, this drive by a race of capitalists, of wealthy elite, and of people who ultimately became that, and or through their efforts of becoming wealthy and elite, supported these destructive processes that not just created harm in the world, who damaged the earth and seeded contamination, what would become industries that would then put us in this position to face this climate crisis that we're in right now. But also in the relationships, it was seeing that Black life was so only valuable to the degree to which it could be, our lives could be forced to work and you know, so consumed in that way, or forced to forcibly raped to carry the children of the next generation, who could then pick up the tools of enslavement and carry forward the work and continue building the roads, the universities, and so forth. And then other people of color who have been pulled into these processes, land taken from Native and Indigenous folks to then seed this, the industrial processes. Poor white folks who were drawn into these historical processes, whose labor and of adults and children were consumed at a certain point in history to be able to support the development of manufacturing and industry, to Asians who were brought to this country for the explicit purpose of building railroad tracks across the country and alongside enslaved labor and so forth. So there are, at the very roots of the contributors to this climate crisis, a real a set of race relations based on hierarchies of inferiority and superiority that became embodied in the systems that of law, of the legislative and policy systems, and the way that laws were honored, the state-sanctioned violence, and also, you know, paramilitary violence against Black and brown bodies throughout the years in order to force people to carry their economic role within society. So I think that history shows that these relationships are very much there and strong. And the solutions to the climate crisis require that we address those divisions, the racial divisions and hierarchy within ourselves, and our demands for what must change in the world around us. And I say yes, within ourselves, because there's a degree to which we, being born and raised in this world, are shaped by the messages that we receive through the various institutions that reflect the ideas, the ideologies, and the cultures of the ruling groups that want to continue to perpetuate the harm that's taking place in the world, that continues to happen, and that we must wage epical battles against. So I'm nearing my close, and I just want to, I intended to spend a lot more time on what we can do. So bear with me just a couple more minutes to offer these thoughts. One, so even if, I think even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases now, so this is kind of like a reality thing to keep in mind, that we may not see immediate impacts because the warming could happen for a couple of decades. For those scientists on the call or in this session, in this conversation, we know that it takes a while for the planet to respond because, for example, carbon dioxide, which is one of the main heat trapping gases, it lingers in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. So there's a bit of a lag effect. And the impacts that we're experiencing now are from a couple of decades ago, several decades ago. So we're feeling the impacts of what was emitted, or the cumulative impacts from the 50s and from the 60s. So, but it's not too late to avoid or limit some of the worst effects of climate change by reducing through mitigation efforts and pursuing the carbon is not the only greenhouse gas example, but if I were to pursue that one, reducing the flow of carbon in the atmosphere is one way. So by mitigating we can mitigate the impacts of the climate crisis by slowing the emissions, by reducing them, by eliminating them altogether. We can also, as humans, learn to adapt, learn to live with climate change that is already upon us. And then, of course, continue to ask the questions, what more can we do? And so then what more can we do gets me back to this question of like, what kind of ancestor can we be? Can I be? When I look at my granddaughter and I think about what her great-grandchildren, what I might be leaving them through my actions, what kind of impact might I be impressing upon her, who would then pass on to her children or great-grandchildren, if she has them, but the children that she's with, it has me think differently about how I'm showing up in this world. Some of the things that we can do and that I've chosen to do include, one, this is a huge election year, so I'm sure you all are already on top of this and trying to get everybody and their mama and grandmama and everybody who can vote register to vote, because this is a turning point for us. There are also legislative channels, so advocating for climate-friendly policies at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, whatever level you feel drawn and aligned to. You don't have to take on all the things, but what is something that you can do? You can engage if it's within your divine destiny, if you feel it in your spirit. I've got to be on the front lines of a protest, of a direct action. I'm going to get on there. Then you should follow your heart, follow your spirit, and do it smartly. Engage in strategic and intelligent direct actions that are in alignment with what your heart, what your spirit is calling you to do. You can seed the new. So the question is, well, once we topple this, once we, overturn the system that is harmful and it feeds off of divisions, what do we put in its place? Well, we've got to have practice with the new kinds of relationships that we want. We have to have practice with the systems that we want. And now is a time to really try those out. So you can be among the seeders of the new, the earth seeders, as Octavia Butler has beautifully talked about, and many have spoken, especially recently, about. It's really working out what are the kinds of relationships that need to exist based on equity and justice. How do we feed ourselves by relying on ourselves and those relationships with one another to meet our needs? How do we live? And so seeding and working out the new is important. Lots of cooperatives are really great examples of working those out. Shifting personal practices while demanding that the companies we patronize change as well. So, you know, there's been a lot of demands on grocery stores, for example, to refrain from or reduce, and not just grocery stores, but also counties and cities, to replace plastic grocery bags, single-use grocery bags, and provide reusable grocery bags. And so this is a really great example of people demanding that these changes happen, and having electeds in office who are aligned with that and really making that happen around the country in different places. And so, you know, there are many ways that these personal decisions, coupled with the demands on the companies who patronize, can really lead to put us on the path of, one, getting excited and inspired to do more, and two, affecting change within those companies that is in the direction that addresses this crisis. And so again, there are lots of things that can be done. I think the thing that I want to ask is that sometimes what we're seeing is, it can feel overwhelming, and the news and the reality is really, it can feel gloom and doom, because it is a hard reality. But the hope and the light that and the divine, you know, opportunities in this is that each one of us and all of us together can call forward those divine lights within us to do things within our lives that we can do. And as we develop our courage and our discipline, our strength, our excitement and passion around it, we can do more. We can push those boundaries and do more and inspire others through our excitement and through our actions to do what they can do within their incrabia, within their destiny, within their divine purpose in life. So I guess I'll end with that, and I would love to just close with a prayer that I opened with. The young lady who spoke to the fighting the bad people, just really, you know, that and all the water warriors, the young people water warriors on the call, just really inspired me to want to open and close with that, because it feels like within and even among you all, and then what the beautiful things that I've been able to learn about Reverend Noonan is that, you know, when we have these questions, when we're on this divine path, the Creator puts us with folks who are also on that path. And even though we might not do the exact same things, we're together bringing the necessary change in the world. We're bringing the light into the world that's needed. And we're moving in the direction of affecting change at scale that is necessary to address this climate crisis. So I'd like to close with, God looks into the hearts of those who seek answers to ancient questions, and then places us on the path and in the company of those who also seek. On that path, we encounter blue skies, a stumbling stone or two, whatever will inspire us to ask more questions. The job of answering questions has been granted to the celestial and guardian Abosum, our spirit guides, the angels in the midst. And after much walking, we look to the left and look to the right and know that we are not alone. we begin to see and to hear and to seek to speak the wonders of God, the solutions that lay within us to bring about the change that is necessary in this world, those that are chosen by God to serve. This was a prayer that was given to me from my teacher, Nana Nkobia Akuya, Ama Operabia Bequeen, and I just want to share or honor her by saying that it is from her that I received this prayer. And I want to give thanks that you all have taken time to listen to what I've brought, and Reverend Noonan and Joy, Karen, Nyla, and all of you all for this blessing.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Kilimanjaro. You just gave us so much. So much. And we neglected to say earlier on that we're going to spend a little bit of extra time after worship for anybody who can stay to have a little bit more conversation with you, about 15-20 minutes. So we really do hope folks are going to stay on. But I need to just kind of say, I think, even though I know kind of, we don't have a time limit in this worship service, but I want to kind of step out of Chronos for a minute and go into Kairos, which is kind of God's time, because I need to say that something that's really burning in me is the fact that you just kind of dropped this thing on earlier when you were talking with our children and our leaders, and you talked about praying with the water. So I just wondered if I could ask you for just a minute, could you, because that's just burning in me or swimming around in me, and I suspect I'm not alone. I'm so intrigued by how that takes expression in your life. Could you just say a word about that? That just seems so powerful and life-giving.
I would love to. So water is, a lot, as with the waters, the trees, the lands, the earth. These are my relatives, they're beings that live in and of themselves, not independent from us. I mean, we don't live independent from the lands and the waters and the trees, and they don't live independent from us. And so sacred waters, as experiencing and feeling that divine connection with the waters, is just so, it's always been such a very important part in my life, and something that I'll speak to, something a relatively recent and experience that I've been blessed to have and am participating in. And I want to call out also, Karen Smith has been on this journey with Sacred Waters Pilgrimage as participant, as healer, as spirit connector in her own right. And so I've been a part of a group of Black and Native women who really felt a calling to heal with one another and in relationship with the waters and the lands that support them. Along the Mississippi is the first journey of what we're being called to do. So participating in multiple journeys over several years of really healing our relationships with one another and healing our relationships with the waters. Waters who are givers of life, who are sources of life, who have their own personalities and bring their own life and bring life to the places that they're in. And so along this journey that we're calling the Sacred Waters Pilgrimage, from the headwaters to the Mississippi, we've been moving to the Gulf, and we just were in the 5th stop in Memphis, Tennessee, offering prayers to the waters, prayers for healing. So sending our energy through vibration, the vibration of our words, the vibrational energy that we emanate through goodness, good intention, and through the prayers of our bodies. that we're praying for the healing and the elevation of the water and the vibrations of the waters. We take some water out and we pray with the water. And we've been carrying it down. So some of us have been water carriers where we're also carrying it down from one stop to the next, leaving a bit at each stop. And we know that the waters flow. And the part that we're bringing in is our intention to be a part of healing processes and to offer that back to the waters. So we're taking a bit from them with their permission, and then we're offering it back to them with prayers and good intentions that this is one of many journeys that we want to be a part of in helping to elevate the vibrations of the waters and be part of calling for the cleansing and the clearing and the halting of polluting further of these waters. Where many Native Indigenous women have been walking the waters for many generations, have been our water carriers within their traditions. And we were blessed to meet with some water carriers of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe folks at the headwaters, and have been able to meet others as we've moved down. So we're one of many who have done this and who will continue to do this in the future. And we see ourselves as part of a necessary continual prayer to heal the waters and the lands that surround it, and also to heal our relationships as Black and Native people, because we've had different histories at different points. We've supported, and Native folks have brought Black people in at different times in history. Black people have brought Native people into the communities at different points in history. Black people have also worked on behalf of whites to murder Native people, and Natives have enslaved Black people as part of enslavement processes. So there are these complicated histories that we feel our ancestors are calling for us to heal. And in this lifetime, because of how some of the anti-Black racism has showed up and appropriation of Native cultures and practices has showed up in our lifetimes, we feel like we need to do something about that as part of addressing the dividedness that is part of what makes environmental injustices and the climate crisis even possible. It's the unity that we need, the strength and the power of our being together. We might not be in agreement with all the things, but the strength and power of our coming together to protect and save the earth and the generations who have yet to be born. We feel that is a divine calling, and that is part of our ways of addressing the climate crisis. And the waters have been like speaking to us, as this journey. So it's almost like, it's sort of like for those who've dreamt about your, someone who has passed, and this person has come to give you a message. It's sort of like the ways that the waters are coming to. It's like, okay, you've heard us and you're doing something, and so now let's continue talking, and so we can't not pray, if that makes it. I know it's a double negative, but it's like we can't not be in communication and fulfill this thing, this role that we've been asked to do and that we've agreed to do. So I don't know if that's it's kind of like a fragmented answer in a way, because it's partly praying to the waters, partly our own tradition, but it's also part of a necessary way that we're communicating along this journey.
Thank you so much for adding that. We just a couple weeks ago had what we consider one of our high holy days in this church, which is Water Sunday, where we kind of bring water from places that we found kind of rest or refreshment over the summer. And that water comes from all over the world, and it's that water that becomes our waters for baptism. And so just learning to pray in all kinds of different ways in our community is a really important part of spiritual practice. So thanks so much for sharing a little bit more about that. And I suspect maybe we can hear more about some of those things in the conversation after.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll be here.
Wow. Okay. So we are moving through and together, and want to just note thanks so much for to visitors who are here for the first time today. We're so grateful that you're here. This is our time of noticing what we give to one another, what we give to make a community like this, our church, this congregation, the work that we do in the world, and the work we're trying to do within ourselves and among us, between us, possible. So this is the time when we offer our gifts. There will be in the chat box a link if you would like to be able to give online, and also a note and reminder that this is our outreach month, and we are tasked with and challenged by our own leaders to raise $5,000 for the justice work of kind of racial accessibility, gender, and environmental justice. So we invite you to both give generally to the congregation and also specifically for this outreach work. So Ian, I wonder if you would kind of share that the slide, and Ian, if you would put that information for giving in the chat box, please. And then as you do that, if you could please share the next slide, I want to just very, very briefly highlight something that's very important for us to note on this Sunday. And I totally jumped to offering before doing prayers, but we'll just finish this and come back to our prayer time. Just want to note that this Sunday is possible. Dr. Ife's being with us is possible, as so many other things over the last several decades around earth justice through our Environmental Justice Center. We give thanks for the work of the Environmental Justice Center. Originally, it was founded in 1989 as the celebration of creation. It is run now by our own director, Joy Berge, and a steering committee that includes Bonnie Taylor, Melinda Tatum Kaiser, and Aaron Landis. This center has led us in so many ways in making a commitment to the earth part of our essential and core spiritual practice, and equipping us and helping us, teaching us and supporting us to be a witness in the world, and prophets in the world. So the center has helped many of us to learn to speak publicly and testify on behalf of the earth, and write in newspapers. So we really give thanks for the work of the Environmental Justice Center, and outreach contributions this month make the work of the Environmental Justice Center possible. So we'll finish this time. Information for giving is in the text box, and I'll turn it now over to Kip for our time of prayers. Go from this place. Take the world that you have inherited and let us build a world together that we want to pass on. Honor the waters, seed the earth, sing in the dark. Know that you are surrounded by relatives all around, and that as you hear this benediction now drummed by Karen, know that you are held in the rhythms of spirit. Amen. And please stay on for our conversation with Dr. Ife Kilimanjaro. Amen. 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 Thank you again, Karen and Dr. Ife, for bringing your full selves to this. And thank you for your work and your witness and your sacred presence in this world. Thank you to Nyla for your words and your voice, and Maya and Leslie for bringing your voice to our opening sentences, and for everyone here in this circle, especially visitors. We're glad you were with us. At this time, I'll turn things over to Reverend Margaret Ernst, our associate pastor, and Joy Berge as they lead us in our time of conversation. For those who aren't staying, go well all and have a wonderful week. Amen.
And thank you to Karen for that blessing. And thank you so much to Dr. Kilimanjaro for speaking so truthfully and prophetically about the crisis we are in, and particularly in tracing us back to the roots of that crisis so far and in so many layers. So we thank you so much for everything you brought. You have shed so much light on things, and we are fortunate to have you with us for a follow-up conversation. As Linda said, for those of you who are with us for the first time today, my name is Reverend Margaret Ernst, and I'm our Associate Pastor for Community Engagement. And I want to begin our discussion with asking folks who stay to put in the chat box just one word that is sitting with you from Dr. Kilimanjaro's talk. Just one word as you think back to what you heard, something that really resonated. What is one word that is sitting with you, or a feeling, like Joy has said as well? I'm going to put ancestor. And I will read some of these out from the chat, and then I will pass it to Joy to facilitate the rest of our conversation. So power, relatives, praying with the water, responsibility, healing of water, our children's great-grandchildren, connectedness, and you can continue to put in words that you have been left with, or feelings that you really feel in your body, having heard the talk today, as we continue our conversation. And Jamie adds responsibility, praying with the water, and grandchildren. So Joy, I'll pass it over to you as we continue our conversation.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you so much to Dr. Ife for staying with us for a few more minutes. So moving. Your words were just so moving, Dr. Ife. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm facilitator to hit you with, to say what hit me the most, perhaps. And that was your pointing out that our solutions to the climate crisis must address racial injustice. And although that seems so obvious, it also just kind of hit me upside the head of, how could I have never thought of it that way? How could that not be so obvious to me? I have come over the years to understand, and this is largely with Linda's help and influence and wisdom, that our energy portfolio is just so unfair and so racist in the way that our traditional energy use disproportionately impacts and hurts people of color first and foremost. But if you have other ways, I need somebody to help me think about how to think about this. So Dr. Ife, if you have more thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
I mean, there are a gazillion examples, but I think what first comes to mind for me is that we're all harmed by notions of superiority and inferiority. Like, that's like the one thing that comes to my mind. And what I mean by that, or how I'd like to explain that, is that where, as you mentioned, people of color, Black folks, Native folks being hurt first and worst by the impacts of climate change. That's real, and you can see see this evident in the follow-up behind disasters that take place. For example, Black folks, as an example, living in areas that are cheaper to live in, but are more vulnerable to climate change because of a variety of forces, historical forces, redlining, and other things that have created these pockets of places where Black folks can only live. And then when the storms come in, which they do, particularly in the South, we're seeing them with greater frequency and intensity, then time and time again, it's the same populations that are really being harmed and forced out, driven out. And in the responses, the policies, and then the money that follows or that flows from those policies, to see the ways that they are directed toward wider middle class communities, as we've seen like a couple of years ago when Hurricane Michael, I believe it was, kind of hovered over the Carolinas. A lot of the post-storm investment went into some of the middle-class white communities that were impacted, and then folks who bore the brunt of the flooding when I interviewed folks like a year and a half after the storm, were still experiencing the harmful impacts of that: standing water, debris, being required in one South Carolina town, being told that in order for homes to for homeowners to get support to rebuild their homes, they would have to elevate their homes 7 feet and above, but there were no resources that would support that. And so there are like lots of examples of those. And I think when I say that we're all harmed in this idea that, and the practices that some people are better than others, it's that the folks who are harmed, black people, I'll continue with that, with our population as an example, then we believe that we're inferior, or we're fighting constantly uphill battles to demand that resources flow, uphill battles to say that our lives are valuable enough that we should get some reinvestment or some investment into our communities and so forth. And then the folks who are privileged in the inferiority, superiority dichotomy, it's that folks think that they're more deserving, that the middle class communities, that middle class white community, for example, in North Carolina, is more deserving of these resources and this investment, that that for things that they may have earned in this lifetime, but historically may not have earned because of the policies that then support the distribution of funds. There's this inflated kind of notion, this community ego that says that we are more deserving, we are better. So I would argue that in this climate crisis, we're all harmed. We're harmed in different ways. And at the core of it, when we look at the way that race and class division, and they're, and gendered and non-gendered, the way that people who fall outside of acceptable views, people and communities that are outside of what's considered acceptable in this society, then it becomes justifiable to not invest in or to support harm to these groups and people, while the desirables are protected, are invested in, are supported, our communities get rebuilt, and so forth. And then I'll just give one last example in the whole FEMA process, because the last few years I've been talking with people directly impacted, Native and Black people who've been directly impacted by some of these disasters that have taken place in the last few years. And the whole FEMA process is completely designed for middle class people. And so renters and poor folks, even poor homeowners, to be able to have access to some of those resources it's cumbersome at best and impossible at worst, and what makes it cumbersome, aside from the priorities, you know, the home ownership in middle class communities they're considered priorities, but the instructions and are so hard to get to really wrap people's minds around, or are only partially given. After, I remember people reporting that, well, they told me to come and fill out this form, and when I filled out the form, I was not told that I also had to apply for a small business loan, and I was told that I also had to do this. But my credit is bad, and so I didn't do that. So it's like this incredible red tape that people of color communities and poor folks get time and time again in the aftermath of these storms. So, and it just really disaster lays bare the inequities and the divisions that we see.
Oh, thank you. That's so interesting and so helpful. So I always like to figure out, so what can I do? How can I change my behavior to respond to this? So I would lovingly challenge all of us, you know, in this community in Chosin Hill to pay attention to these issues, to be more aware, see who's not getting covered by the press, or who is getting covered by alternative press, and then call up our elected officials, you know, call Senator Casey, let him know. I suppose we could call Senator Toomey for the next 2 years. You know, we can call our members of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And just help educate them.
Yeah. And, you know, something too that is like really, it's a really tough thing. And also it's a way that can really help to cultivate strength and courage. And that is to have hard conversations with people we love also, or like I'm not saying go out and challenge, you know, your grandmother who is, you know, a card carrying, whatever. I'm not suggesting that. And I'm not actually, it's hypothetical. I'm not actually assuming that you all have grandmothers that are card carrying white nationalists. But the thing is, sometimes we're around people that we love, or we're with friends who say stuff that is, or who participate in things that are harmful, and we feel that in our spirits, but sometimes we don't say anything or do anything or share that we're doing something, even when we are. And so sometimes, so as we are calling public officials, as we're pressing people who are outside of our circles to do better, we can learn a lot, and we can grow a lot by pressing some of those folks that are closest to us, because it also helps us as fighters for justice to, you know, to grow our armor and to grow our strength that we can then carry into some of these other fights as well.
Thank you so much. As Margaret just typed in the chat, let's open it up to discussion. So Margaret, how do we want to do this? Do we want to have people raise their electronic hands, or you?
Yeah, I think that our follow-up group is small enough that you can just take yourself off mute, and if we have people at the same time trying to take them off, we'll just figure it out then. So, or you can let us know that you have a question in the chat box. So let us know if you have a question in the chat box. You can write it in the chat, or you can just take yourself off mute and go ahead. So what stood out to you, everybody else? Joy shared what stood out to her, and what stood out to you, and what burning questions are you left with? Karen, let me take you up. There you go. Great.
It's always a pleasure to hear you, Ife, and all the message that you bring. I'm just curious, is there any plan for talk of climate change to be among, I guess, taught in school? Is there any, like, or any school that's actually doing that?
There are, I have not heard of entire, of school systems that have invested in climate change curricula. And I'm not sure how widely there are entire curricula on climate change. So I'm less familiar with what's available. What I know just from my personal experience, and it's not from a research or, you know, kind of seeing all of what's out there, is that a lot of climate change instruction has been teacher-led or school-led, but not school or in what is it, school system wide led, if that makes sense. And it would be wonderful to see more of that, and to there be tremendous investment into the materials that with instruction, the tools that teachers can use to instruct at different levels on this nationwide. When I worked as a principal some years ago, about 10 years ago in Detroit, and you know, in some of the materials, there were maybe nods to environmental issues, but within the context of you know, just kind of like the broader scientific understanding of Earth processes. And so, you know, there was a little bit about climate and environment that was like spoken, you know, kind of like not quite an afterthought, but just mentioned, like a little nod. So I don't have the sense that it's nearly as widespread as as like what the ALEC invests in the development of pedagogy and curriculum. For those who are educators, you know, it's a whole thing, because there are the teacher materials that lay out the philosophy and the ideas. And then for each grade level, the things that at each grade level people need to learn and hit on, all of it is grounded in the overarching set of ideas and assumptions that the curriculum is based on. And so there are, like in Kentucky, school systems that receive generous donations by coal industries in the form of school materials that really talk about the benefits of coal. And so children grow up learning these kinds of things. And so I know that's a long answer to your very direct question. I don't know how widespread, but from what I've seen, it's been largely driven by individual teachers and schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. I think Bonnie and Renee have their hand raised.
Yeah, so I as an educator and as somebody who's teaching a course that is focused on environmental systems and societal systems, I think I know you're absolutely right. It is driven by individual teachers or specific programming that does have that as part of its tenets or you know, central core concerns.
Mm-hmm.
What I know that many public school teachers struggle with is that it is such a political issue right now. And we are told specifically in public school districts to be mindful of how we speak about our political affiliation. And so to sometimes talk about it, it's inevitable that we give away what our political affiliation is or what our perceptions are of what is happening from a political standpoint. So it's a real difficult thing to do in front of children to balance, you know, an unbiased perspective while still trying to teach them what the right things are to do for our earth, our home.
That is so real. That is so real. What you made me think of, are you Bonnie or Renee that just spoke?
Bonnie.
Bonnie, thank you, Bonnie. Sorry, I missed it if you said it in the beginning. And what you made me think of too was, like, I know that in in high schools in particular, there are students who might organize an environmental justice club or climate club, something like that. And that gives young people more freedom, and after school, perhaps teachers more freedom to, as advisors, to at least plant seeds. But what you mentioned is an unfortunate reality, and in this moment where science has become a political issue. I mean, in some ways it is, because even before there were science deniers, what got identified as scientific and therefore worthy of being considered science sometimes was at the expense of indigenous knowledge and other things. But in this moment, it's just really unfortunate that some basic things are now political, have been made political. I applaud you for what you're doing.
Thank you both. We have gone on for more than 15 minutes. Dr. Ife, can we ask you to stay for one more question?
Sure, and I'm sorry I'm so long-winded. Maybe that's the issue.
I think your words are beautiful, and delighted to hear every word that comes from you. Margaret, I believe, did you have a question?
Sure, I have one, but I want to open the floor again. If anybody else, I'm looking, you can raise your actual hand or your virtual hand, or take yourself off mute if you have one. And if not, then I will go ahead and ask mine. Okay, great. Thank you again, Dr. Kilimanjaro. I think I'm left with thinking, as a faith community, which we are, a spiritual community, we have the power of being a corporate body, not like corporate business, but a body together. And what do you see as possible, or like what hopeful kind of actions do you see faith communities taking as, together collectively in this movement and work? And I think I'm personally, I do feel interested in like our choices around our building and things like that, but I'm more interested in like what's possible as a community to change systems together as well.
That's interesting. So two things come immediately to mind. One is there are no limits to what is possible. And I think it's, courageously working that out together. And as an organized body, to explore where positions can be taken and actions can be made that really push some of the boundaries or places of comfort potentially, but maybe beginning with taking public positions on things, and then the work that's happening within the community, sharing that broadly and calling for inviting others to join you, accompany you in that. The other thought that comes to mind, it may not necessarily actually apply to you all because of the non-denominational / multi-denominational approach, and that is that often faith communities are on the more conservative side of things, but at the very root and foundations of Christianity is radical revolutionary practice and thought. And so that the second thought is around grounding in and carrying forward those radical foundations and really inform the kind of the kind of change that we want to call for in the world, and then showing up in the ways that requires. So those are a couple of thoughts that come to my mind. And then of course, as an organized body, just recognizing the space that you hold in a community, in a city, in a world, and really leaning into that. and you'll lose some and you'll gain many.
Thank you for that. I love courageously working that out together as a charge for us. It's a really good answer when there's no one, one 3-step method to this.
Yeah, there's not. And nor should there be. I was on a listening to a podcast. Adrienne Marie Brown has been exploring, the Octavia Butler's work and so forth, and its relevance for now. And one thing that she shared on one of the podcasts I heard her on was people putting forward lots of solutions, and who's to say, who am I to say, or who is she to say we should try these 3 and not these 3? It's like we're in a moment where we've got to get everything out on the table to really see what's gonna work, what is gonna position us to really bring about the change that's needed. And it might not be, it's likely to not be one thing. It's going to be lots of things coming from lots of folks who are really clear that we've got to do something, and we've got to do some good things to really change. So yeah, so I guess that's it.
Thank you for that. Well, let us have that be our blessing after the blessing, our benediction after the benediction today, that we might continue to courageously try in all of the ways, with no limits or narrowness on that, to live into a planet that we want our great-grandchildren and our nieces and our great-grandnieces.
That's right.
I want to also acknowledge and thank yet again folks who joined us for the first time today, or who came as a friend. Welcome. We warmly welcome you and are so glad that you are part of our virtual space today. And you can find out more about our church at chestnuthillunited.org. And this is our outreach month. So for the remainder of the month, we'll be continuing to have talks about our RAGE values and principles. Next week, we'll be joined through a pre-recorded sermon from Bishop Dwayne Royster, who is the executive director of Power, and will speak to us about racial justice. So thank you all. And thank you especially to Dr. Kilimanjaro.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. See you next week and in between days. Take care.